Joining us today, we've got an HR general manager who's changing the world and changing perceptions and impacts, the impacts that it's having on lives out there, guys. Please welcome to the show our recruitment talent coach, Rowena Lalla. Rowena, how are you doing?
Hi, Kevin. I'm doing well. How are you?
Good, good, good. Thank you for taking some time to be on the show today.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So I want to kick off, before we kick off with our topic of discussion, don't you want to just tell us more about you, more about your background and who you are and what you do?
I am currently a general manager for HR for a global logistics company, our head office based in Europe. I also look after the recruitment function for the Africa region for this particular company. My background is in psychology. I have around about 20 years experience in HR across the different aspects of HR, so mainly HR generalist.
Fantastic. So Rowena, I mean, one of the points of why I wanted to have this conversation with you. You recently written an article about the business of bullying. So don't you want to just kick off and give us an intro about this subject choice? Because I think it's when I saw the headline of this on LinkedIn, I was like, this is a conversation people generally like to avoid, or people just don't like actually speak about it, right? So don't you want to give us some insights about why you wrote this and the topic of this discussion?
Okay, yes. So my personal mission is to make leaders aware of pertinent issues in the workplace, which impacts the lives of their people. And as you've said, bullying is not a topic that is often spoken about. In fact, I think it's a topic that's actually difficult to identify by many business leaders, as well as employees. The reality is that as leaders, we have a responsibility to the people that we lead. And bullying is one of the topics that I feel quite strongly about in terms of creating awareness around this. It is rife, but we don't talk about it enough in business. And we don't acknowledge that it actually happens in business quite frequently. And that's the reason for me actually writing this article on this particular topic. And if you read my article, you would see that it's quite analytical, because I want to position it from sort of a leader's perspective as well as an employer's perspective. So I give quite a real life example in my article so that people could actually relate to it, so they can understand.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, in terms of that, don't you want to just give us the shortened version of that? Because, I mean, you speak about workplace scenario and give us a bit of a scenario, and then you look at the profile of a bully. Don't you want to just sort of, in summary, sort of give us that overview of what that conversation is? Because I think it's definitely, I'm going to share this link, in the description boxes, and people can see it online. But it's definitely worth, setting the stage and really getting people's brains on board with that.
Okay, so I decided to use a specific example. We are so accustomed to believe that bullies are the big burly guys on the playground at school, right? Yeah. Those that are physically intimidating. But the reality is that bullies come in all shapes and sizes, and both genders as well, right? In the workplace, it could be that petite young lady in an executive role. Bullying can take place at various levels. So it doesn't always have to be traditionally what we would think as manager and employee. It can be between colleagues. It can be within a leadership team. It can be within team members of different departments. So the scenario I chose specifically was between two women in leadership roles. And I gave sort of the whole situation of them being away on a workshop where, the one more sort of the one leader who has been there for such a long time bullied and picked on, sort of demeaned the newbie within the team.
Yeah.
And that was basically the example I used. And then what I did was I did a lot of research in terms of what the profile of a bully looks like, not in terms of physically, but emotionally and psychologically, as well as what is the profile of the target. And you can see that there's generally quite a lot of similarities in terms of those that have been bullied, as well as those who bully.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, bullying is about shaming. If we put it simply, it's about shaming. That's ultimately what it is.
Yeah, and that's why I thought it was a really interesting conversation to touch on, because I speak of personal experience where I've worked for a female leader in an environment where she was just a complete bully, and she was in front of people. She seemed like a wonderful. I even have an association with how she looked.
Yes.
So every time I come across someone who's got brown curly hair and she's 28 years old and she's very Afrikaans, I make that association to this bullying, and yet in front of people she was just a wonderful woman and kind and caring. But when she specifically dealt with me, there was often just an obvious way. I don't know, it felt like I was threatening her in some way, or something was always off, right? And I think that's why I wanted to touch on this space. I think women often or we make the assumption that men are the bullies and women don't do such things. And also, never mind the race card that we go through in the world, and the immense diversity that we have to sort of acknowledge and work through, and then add all the political conversations that go with that, and eventually you just have this prime example of how bullying can sort of show up even in an adult space. Role.
Yeah.
Right? So, I mean, do you also speak of personal experience? Is this something you've actually experienced in your life? Something you've seen?
In my work experience over the years, it's definitely something that I've seen. And I've seen various scenarios, and I've seen this play out. And I've realized that often the leaders involved, or the managers of these typical bullying profiles, they don't realize it. Because as you've said, it seems this person seems like a nice enough person. Typically, to everyone around, they don't recognize that, and often it's laughed off. So we look at the bully and we think, oh, no, that's how that person behaves. And it's okay. But if you look at the typical profile of a bully, it generally is someone that is confident, is assertive. But what you'll find is that they have very little or no empathy for others. So to their managers and to the public in general, they can appear to be quite charming because, in fact, they are highly manipulative. So they will do whatever it takes sort of for their own personal gain. And that's what it's about. It's about personal gain. It's about feeling superior to the other individual. So they will pick on, and I don't want to say the weaker person because I don't believe that to be true. It's more like they pick on the more sensitive person. The empath, the person that is sort of affected by this, right? And the reality is that we have these bullies in positions of authority. And the reason that happens is because these bullies are actually quite ambitious. So generally speaking, they get to positions of authority because of their desire for power and control, And so they get there because they're ambitious. Yet they still feel the need to criticize and humiliate targets. And this also, it comes from a place of insecurity, right? Because a person that's secure within themselves would never demean another human. It's just not the right thing to do, and it's not necessary. So that's the reality of the profile of the bully. And sometimes we look at it and we sometimes even feel sorry for the bully, not understanding the impact that that person has had on the target and the greater team within that organization. Because what happens is, particularly if they're, at an executive role or a management role, is that filters to the lower levels, right? You learn how to be a leader from your leader.
Yes, absolutely. And I laugh because you would, not laughing at the situation, but you would think that as the leader, you would want to show up differently. You want to, put your best foot forward. And yet, shaming and belittling and projecting your own insecurities, people often do this. They often do that. And it doesn't matter what title they have.
No, it doesn't. And what often happens in team situations is that once the bully has humiliated their target, they will try to isolate them from the rest of the team, right? And that also is quite manipulative, right?
Yeah.
If I go back to my scenario where I speak about the particular bully actually speaking on behalf of the leadership team, where she did not actually have permission or support from the leadership team. However, in that particular scenario, the leadership team, they didn't even know how to respond.
Wow,
So
yeah.
even though you're sitting around the table with leaders of an organization, they actually don't know how to respond to this. They were silent. But afterwards, in terms of my scenario, they went to the target and said, we don't support it, right?
Yeah.
In actual fact, ideally, somebody should have said, that's not okay. The way you're speaking to her is not okay. And that would have stopped it, actually. It would have stopped it from continuing. But because it was not stopped, it was actually supported. Without them understanding that they were actually supporting it. They were, in fact, supporting that kind of behavior within that team.
And also on that point, it's just occurred to me that, as you mentioned, by not saying anything, you're indirectly supporting the bullying.
Yes.
And that's not okay.
Yeah. And it's as simple as them sort of standing up and saying, look, the way you're speaking to her, that's not okay.
Yeah.
That's not okay. And we don't support that in our team. We don't support that kind of behavior. But as long as nobody speaks up, it will continue. And it doesn't matter. We often say to the target, we say to them, it's your responsibility to speak up.
Yeah.
But it not necessarily.
Absolutely. And I think that's, such a significant point to anyone that's paying attention or seeing or hearing or experiencing bullying in an environment. Sometimes certain people are not equipped, and they're not. They take it upon themselves to just shy away from confrontation. So for someone to say something is actually, it's significant for that individual who's being bullied. So, sorry, Rowena, are you there? Hello?
Hello? Yeah.
Sorry, I lost you for a second. Okay, cool. So to carry on from where we left off, why is it important for leaders to identify workplace bullying? Why is this important?
Okay. So bullying has a devastating emotional impact on the target. And it can be a catalyst for creating a toxic work environment. The reality is that corporate bullying does not just impact the target, it impacts the entire team. So whoever's witnessed this, whoever's actually heard about it, everyone is impacted, right? Yeah. Everyone loses when a bully is in a position of power and influence. That's the reality, right?
Yeah.
And a common error is that we make in business is that we actually make the target to feel like they're too sensitive and they're responsible and they're too weak, when actually we should not be doing this.
Yeah.
We should not be doing this because this just supports the shaming that is coming from the bully, right? So it's really, really important that leaders and managers identify the bullying as soon as possible and put a stop to it and say, no, we will not tolerate this. Because if you continue to ignore this behavior, it will continue to happen. Bullies bully because they can, because they're allowed to do so.
Yeah, because no one ever says anything. Yeah.
Yeah, nobody ever says stop. It's not okay.
Yeah. You know, I was looking at some stuff on healthline.com where they speak about bullying, especially in a work environment. And, you know, part and parcel of what they mention here is the physical health effects of bullying, as well as the mental health effects of bullying. You know, essentially, people from being anxious to having physical symptoms of digestive issues. There's somatic symptoms as well, like headaches, increased or decreased appetite. To mental effects of bullying, where, you know, thinking and worrying is constantly at the forefront of someone's mind, and creating just more anxiety, dreading to go to work, wanting to stay at home, losing interest in what they're doing. There's an entire list: low self-esteem, self-doubt. And all of these are actual effects that bullying has within a work environment.
Yes, exactly. And some of the responses that I got to my article, private messages, were from people who said they actually had to leave work because they could not handle it anymore. They could not deal with that mentally. And there was no support structure within their organization to actually assist them with counseling or even just acknowledgement. So they had to resign from their job because they you know, it was just not, it was best for their well-being.
Yeah.
And it gets to that point, and you know, the impact is just so great.
Yeah, you know, and you know what's funny is as you're talking, I'm just thinking, you know, throughout all the training that I've ever done in organizations, one of the things that I've noticed as well is specifically when people are overweight, they tend to be funny. And this is just through my own personal experience. They tend to be funny, and they tend to be the jokers of the group. And I've been in a situation where a slightly overweight woman came into the room, and she tended to be quite late all the time. And the group kind of made, you know, it made a joking point out of the fact that, you know, it's because she's heavy, that's why she's always late, right? And I actually brought it to their attention to say to them, guys, just so you know, as much as it's a laughing moment and everyone's laughing and it's funny, you really don't know what impact this really has at the end of the day. You don't know what it's doing to her self-esteem and to her own psyche.
Yeah, look, that's true, and it was really great of you to actually bring it to everybody's attention, because I think often what happens is we're so accustomed to behaving and saying these things that we don't realize how hurtful it can be.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
the long-term damage of this kind of behavior. Yeah.
So, I mean, in terms of giving people advice, I mean, being like 20 years in HR, this is something you come across often. You have a psychology background, you know, so you know the effects that it's having on people. So if we had to sort of give people advice out there and to say, guys, here's some like things you can actually start doing and things you should point out. What is that advice that you can give employees out there today?
Okay, so just for both employees and business leaders and managers out there, I think the important thing is to be aware, to recognize the signs of bullying, or alternatively calling it shaming, to identify when somebody is actually belittling another person, and then to say to them, it's not okay, not okay to do this. It's not okay for us to continue with this kind of behavior. And if it's recognized or seen in somebody else, then to say that I do not support this, and I won't be tolerating it. So it's important that businesses have a zero tolerance to bullying within the team and within the organization, and not to make light of it, not to make it a joke that it's okay, laugh it off. Because as soon as you do that, as a leader or a manager, you become the enabler of the bully. You're almost just as bad in that, And then the other thing is to maybe formalize it in terms of the organization, to create a policy, an anti-bullying policy, and then enforce it. In different countries, there's different laws, but ultimately, the safety of your employees, whether it's physical safety or emotional safety or mental safety, is important. In my article, I actually likened it to sexual harassment.
Yeah.
Because we're more often, not supporting sexual harassment and violence against women and children, right? That's very easy for us to do. But it's not as easy for leaders to stand up against bullying.
Yeah.
So, obviously, depending on the laws, depending on, in terms of the country, you could take disciplinary action against the bully.
Yeah.
Right. And also what's important is to offer counseling services if possible, because there is psychological damage, potentially to the bully as well, because clearly it's coming from some underlying aspects in their own life. Perhaps they've been shamed and now they're projecting that shame upon somebody else. So you actually need to offer the counseling to both the bully and the target. I think what's also important is that we create an environment where targets feel safe to report bullying without being victimized, without being made to feel weak.
Yeah.
So we should have that safe place, that environment, and potentially, it could be reported to the HR department, somewhere that is, confidential and sort of where there's a feeling of safeness. Targets should also be aware that they could follow the company's grievance procedure. So they have the right to lodge a grievance against the bully, and then formally the company would need to take the necessary steps to ensure that this does not happen going forward. I mean, at the end of the day, everyone has the right to feel safe and protected in their work environment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's so important. And I want to thank you again just for being on the show today and sharing this. I'm going to be sharing your link of your profile link, as well as the link to your article out on in the description boxes below, so people can check it out. Rowena, thank you. I think it's a very important conversation to have, and thank you for bringing it more attention. I think it's definitely a big conversation, and more people should be having it.
Thank you, Kevin, for having me. I'm really excited to share this content, because I'm really very focused in terms of getting this message out there. I think it's an important subject. It's an important subject that people need to be aware of. So, if I can share it with as many people as possible, that is my mission. And this is just one of those topics that is important.
Fantastic. Well, any more topics that you share, please, I welcome you back to the show. And thank you for joining us at Lunchtime Careers. So check out the segment. It's going to be happening every other Tuesday and Wednesday on eBiz Radio. And we're going to specifically focus around recruitment, HR, career coaching, and career coaching platforms. Rowena, thank you for your time, and I will chat to you soon.
Thank you.
Cheers for now. Bye.